everybody? It is Rocco, your boy, coming at you with another Age of Sigmar video. In this video, we've got the Lord of Death here to speak on another death faction here. His beloved Ossiarch, Bonereapers, the terrors of my nightmares, things that have just been just crazy. They've gotten a good book. They're feeling good in the new General's Handbook. They've got some cool tech. And more importantly, we're here at things that scare players. You know, what scares a Bonereapers player when they walk up to the table when they've got seemingly so many cards to play there, Yugi boy?
Yeah, so unlike the last show I did with you about a Death Army, my answer isn't going to be nothing.
What?
They're Bone
Stop
Reapers
it.
are extraordinarily good, right? Not going to beat around the bush with that.
Uh-huh.
They're very good. They do very well in a tournament setting. They do have a few things that exist out there that Bone Reaper players are and should be at least a little bit considerate towards.
Okay.
So
So what
I
is
think
this
first,
faction to start with? Hit me with some basic Bone Reaper facts. All I know is they like collecting bones, and there's tax memes, and drink your milk, pay your tax. You know, what's beyond the memes here, sir?
yeah, so in terms of what the army is on the table, it's a hyper elite army. You can very easily take this with you on a plane, kind of a situation.
Yeah.
You're probably not going to be pushing more than 20 models around the table unless you're running some bricks of Mortec Guard, and that's a very specific choice you'd be making.
And even then, it's like 60 between all your hero support and then like 40 infantry guys. So yeah, maybe
Yeah,
50-ish. Yeah. Okay.
tops, tops.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with that elite status, you
Mm.
are also going to be taking models that are individually very good. Your
Okay.
army comes with a special mechanic where you get extra command points,
Mm.
way more than pretty much everybody else in the game is going to get. But
Yeah.
you also get way more command abilities that you're going to be able to spend it on. Every unit in this book has a War Scroll command ability, and there's a little, it's more than a half dozen extra command abilities that your whole army just has access to for being Ossiarch Bone Reapers.
Yeah.
The restrictions still apply in terms
Mm.
of what you can issue and can receive, but you can
Okay.
still use the same command ability more than once if it's on your War Scroll or if it's one of the generic Ossiarch Bone Reaper ones. So you have this really cool toolbox to be really flexible with how you're going to respond to what your opponent puts on the table in front of you.
Okay, and that's the lore of it too, just that martial excellence, and they were able to go and translate that beautifully to the tabletop. And there's also the ability where you just ignore battle shock happening. You know,
Yes.
that's a huge part of this game, whether people want to admit it or not. Because everyone's like, "Oh, battle shock doesn't matter." Well, you know what? You're gonna miss battle shock when the other army you killed half the unit, and there's 20 of them still there, and it's like, "Yeah, we're cool, dude." Like,
Yeah, don't even have to spend the command point. We're
what?
good. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, so these are some good things here. There's also some really doable battle tactics too.
Yeah, there's about three
Mm-hmm.
that are pretty achievable,
Which is a
and
sweet
you
spot
can.
for books, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's on a curve.
Okay.
So there's one that you feel really good about, where you
Mm-hmm.
pick a Cavalos Death Rider unit that's outside of three, and it just has to end the turn within having made a charge and within 3 inches of an enemy unit.
Beautiful.
That one's pretty good.
Yep.
You've got one where you have to get a Mortisan, so those are your small foot wizards,
Mm-hmm.
and a unit of a Mortis Guard contesting an objective that you control wholly outside your territory.
Things you're bringing and doing anyway. Go on.
Yep, the only tough part about that one is some of the missions make that a little bit difficult.
Yeah.
And the other one is have 2 units of Necropolis Stalkers wholly outside your territory and or wholly within enemy territory and more than 9 inches from enemy units.
Okay.
So that one is pretty achievable as well.
Yeah, especially when
The
everything's dead once a stalker unit hits them.
Exactly.
Outside of nine even.
the
Nine. Okay.
the trouble with that one is that it's got to be the 2 units, so you have to have built for it specifically, and
Yeah.
they have to be 9 inches away from any enemy units. So
It's a big
that's not
bubble.
where you that's not necessarily where you want them,
Yeah.
right? Because they are 220 points, and you're bringing them to
For
remove
three.
models. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I feel like that's another strength of this army is that it's so modular and that so many units are around that 200 point threshold where you can swap in and adapt as your meta changes, as your collection grows, that you can do a lot of really cool builds with that.
It's a strength and a weakness, right? So
Yeah,
it's a strength in that you don't have to think very hard in terms of uh, how you work a unit into your army if there's something that's not working for you.
sure,
The
sure.
weakness comes from, the units that are really good are going to shove out everything else that you might want to take, uh,
Mm-hmm.
just because the good units are really good, and the
Yeah.
units that don't meet that level, they cost the same points, and you look at it and you just go, why, why would I bring that unit when I can take this?
Oh, totally, totally.
So
And so, you know, Mr. Cubic Shenanigans, as I'm repping your merch here. Um, these are a lot of strengths. What are some weaknesses? What are you worried about when you rock up to a table with this army? You know, like
so I think you're worried about a couple of things. So I think first and foremost, when what concerns me when I'm coming to a table is, do they have the ability to turn off command abilities, right? So you have Nurgle, who has a command trait that
mm-hmm.
really makes that tough.
Okay,
Uh, you
okay,
have Geminids that are going to be very prominent, and then you have an increasing number of endless spells and heroes that either situationally turn off command abilities or just do it in an aura.
oh sure,
Uh, Roar, right? Every monster has that. That's something that
love
I'm
me some
thinking about
roar.
every time I'm going into an enemy unit. Is
Yeah,
okay. You have to. How do you feel about going into this enemy unit if you don't have all out attack, all out defense, or an extra point of range?
oh
How do
sure.
if they don't get the roar off, then cool, great, fantastic, love that,
Mm-hmm.
awesome.
I mean, I
But
know for
if you
me,
plan for the worst case scenario,
oh sure,
you'll rarely be disappointed when you know something a little more normal occurs.
yeah. And for me too, looking at the new city stuff, I have a free guild general on Griffin that can now roar twice. I just multi-charge 2 units. Whichever one the roar goes off on is the one that I will throw all of my attacks into now.
Sure.
So, yeah, they are adding more of that into the game. All right, all right. So what else?
So
So
yeah. So speaking of cities,
yeah,
shooting is something that Bone Reaper don't love.
I mean,
It's not as Um,
go
it's
on.
not as big of a problem as it used to be
Mm,
because you can, if the meta is shifting that way, tech into a command trait that gives you an aura of -1 to hit and -1 to wound, wholly within 12 inches of the general from shooting.
oh sure, and that's
Which,
great. They have that now because that was
yeah,
for a very long time the one weakness. Kill them out of the combat phase.
yeah, um, it's still the way that you want to do it.
Okay,
So
okay.
that's the really cool thing about this is for a Bone Reaper player, you have a lot of decisions that you can make, and if
Mm,
you get things right, it's going to be very difficult for your opponent to stop. So, for
okay.
instance, if you're expecting to go to a tournament where you're expecting a lot of casting to be happening from an offensive perspective
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of shooting to be happening,
Yep.
you have a subfaction and a command trait that are great.
Sure.
But
No
if you ended
myriad,
up
baby.
going Yeah. If you're expecting a field of a lot of combat armies, you're going to take the -3 to charge aura, and you're going to take the
Mm,
-1 to wound your big guys, or you're going to take crematorians for the splashback,
yeah.
or mortis praetorians for countercharging. All of those things are a good reason to take any of these things.
Mm-hmm.
But if you make the wrong assumption,
Yep.
you can be playing a little flat-footed. So for
Mm,
instance, if you built that anti-shooting, anti-magic army, and
yeah.
you show up to the tournament and everyone's playing corn, hey, your
Ooh.
your command trait and your subfaction don't do anything now.
Yep. Yep.
That's a pretty high price to pay.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but it's a decision you have to make. It's one that you have to make from an informed position before you take the field. And
Oh
hey, you're
yeah.
gonna get some bad draws. That's the way that it goes.
Yep. That's just tournaments, and half the time, you've built this meta killer list, and then you'll run into a mirror match. Then the mirror match is better because it went to an all-rounder style of list where it could take anybody on okay instead of a few armies really great. And then sometimes you might not even see what you thought was the meta at all, and then
Sure.
you're just feeling rough, you
Yeah.
know.
So the next thing that you're probably going to be worried about as a Bone Reaper player is predominantly your army is very slow. You
Okay.
do have 3 or 4 war scrolls that you would consider to be fast.
Uh-huh.
In your Cavalos Death Riders,
Sure.
Arcan,
Yeah.
the Horse Hero, and then I would consider Stalkers on the faster side. They have a run and charge command ability.
Okay.
You can give them +3 to move, right? They become
Yep.
movement 9. That's
Yep.
relatively speedy.
I'll count that. Listen, movement wins games in Warhammer because it either it's you're capping objectives, preventing your opponent from capping objectives, or it gets your melee pieces where they need to go. And stalkers can be very blendy.
Yeah, yeah, they can,
So
and they can
good.
really get you where you need to go too.
Yeah.
So
And Morghast, right? Morghast, they fly.
yeah, Morghast has some speed to them.
Yeah.
The trouble is though, is that
Mhm.
if you eliminate the speed elements, and it's a mission where you have to play a little bit wider,
Mm.
but you're in bad shape. Um, but a good Bone Reaper player is going to make you feel like the whole army is right on top of you early, because they'll have engaged you with the fast elements and then moved up that center to a imposing position where now you have to consider all of the army all at once.
Sure. Sure.
So, unfortunately, if you're playing an army that is just naturally very fast and has the ability to clip your wings,
Mm.
unless you're playing in one of those missions where having a castle is a good thing,
Eh.
you're that's going to be a little bit rough.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
The kind of in that same vein
Mhm.
is uh, high wound count armies are not your favorite thing to run into.
Okay. So like
So
200 zombies. Like what
yeah,
monster would
like
run
200
that? But you
zombies.
know who would? Who?
Yeah,
Okay.
who would do that?
Yeah.
Uh,
Popping
you
out of a
you can
grave
get
site in
you can
front of your
do
deployment? What?
you can do stuff with an army like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you know that that's something that's going to likely be at the event you're going into and the meta that you're going to be dealing with,
Sure.
taking the carrion is great, right?
Mm.
Because
Talk to me
just
about that
cool.
carrion, because I'm just hearing death, right? So carrion's just like a dead body. What is an endless spell?
Yeah, so it's an endless spell, and enemy models within 6 inches of it, as long as they aren't Ossiarch Bonereaper keyword that have a wounds characteristic of 1 or 2,
Okay.
are unable to contest objectives, uh, which is pretty good. So you're
Okay.
gonna you're gonna
Yeah.
cast it, you're gonna drop it, as close to the middle of an objective as you can. All their
Mhm.
models are gonna count for nothing, and you tow in one guy, and it's yours.
Well,
Um, yeah, it's
that changed
it's
from being
good.
a +1 to hit buff. Okay. Yep. There you
Well,
go.
the Bone Tide Streaker was the +1 to hit
Oh,
buff.
that
That
was
one,
it. Yeah.
yeah. So that reduces wards by 1,
Sure.
and you can't inspiring presence or rally within 12 inches of it. So
You're scared, right? It's shrieking
that
at
one's
you.
very good for very different reasons.
Okay.
In
Okay.
combination, those two are excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you have tools with dealing with the things that you don't like to see. But something that is really high wound like that,
Mm-hmm.
you may run into the difficulty of getting through enough of it in time to move up the board, uh, because ideally what those high wound count armies want to do is pin you in place and
Yeah.
then keep feeding junk into those combats. You can't go up and score more.
Oh, sure.
You can't leave. One of the advantages of Bone Reapers, obviously, is they have army-wide retreat and charge. It costs a
Mm-hmm.
command point to do it, but
Yeah.
every unit in your army can do it. So that's the really nice thing is you have some stuff that you're worried about seeing, but
Mm-hmm.
if you make the right decisions at the right time, you budget your command points appropriately, you
Sure.
have this really neat set of tools to make even a bad matchup, bad mission situation, if not favorable, something that you can deal with.
Yeah. Which is totally reasonable. And it again to go with it too with the hordes. If you can't, because again we're not trying to be pro Bone Reaper at the moment, Brendan, but
It's both sides of the coin, right?
it is, it
In
is, it
order
is.
to understand what makes it scary, you have to understand
How
what
you
you're
deal
going
with
to
it.
be what that player is going to be doing about it.
Exactly, exactly. And then it's just smart positioning of your horde units so that they can't fall back onto an objective or hit your own support heroes that are stopping these endless spells from going off because they're Andorian locusts and There's that push and pull there. So
Yeah.
again, this is sounding like there's a little bit of hope this time against the Tides of Nagash. I don't want
There,
to get too crazy, but
there,
okay.
there definitely is.
So,
And I'd say probably the last major thing to be worried about as a Bone Reaper
ooh, there's
player
more. Okay.
is is the ability for your opponent to do mortal wounds outside of uh, the combat or the shoot or a combat or a shooting profile.
Yes.
So that's you have to be targeted as an attack. That's where you are able to flip over to a 5-up ward. Obviously, if you're no Myriad, you've got a 2-up chance of shutting off it coming from a spell, but
Okay.
you can't turn over that mortal wound save unless you are the target of an attack. Now it helps you when you're going to eat and unleash hell.
Mm-hmm.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
On the flip side, if it's coming from some other place,
Ogre
then
charge, Nurgle's plague ability at the end of the battle shock phase.
yep,
We got
you're
him
going to
in
have
this.
your regular 6-up ward. That's fine.
Yep.
Um, you're still going to get a crack at it, but obviously you would much rather be getting your 2-ups, 3-ups,
Yeah.
kind of save, and then a 5-up ward, or in some cases a 4-up ward, and in a very I think
Mm-hmm.
it's unique situation a 3-up ward.
Okay.
Uh, there's a special character build that you can make to make them a 2-up, 3-up. It's pretty cool, but
Hmm.
that's maybe for another time.
Yeah, might have to have you back on a third time here to just talk about that because I'm interested. But okay, so yeah, so we've got some players. So like armies like Nurgle, armies that can again do these mortal wounds, armies like ogres that can do impact hits into OBR consistently.
Yeah,
Armies that have different abilities to do mortals instead of it just being a spell, or if they're not null myriad, just hit them with every spell you got in the book before the Nullstone boys roll in on you. Um, and if they do, maybe just play Corn and beat them at the melee horde game. Because if they're anti spell and you teched into something completely different, there they are.
yeah. I
Okay.
think right now probably the best tech to take is um, from the command abilities or the command traits perspective is taking the -3 to charge aura, and
Yeah.
then making the decision on are you expecting to see magic heavy armies that'll be your problem.
Hmm.
If that's the case, you go no myriad.
Yeah.
If you're more expecting your combat armies to be a problem and you have Immortus Guard and Stalkers, then
Which
you
are
go
strong
Petrifex.
units right now, especially Immortus
If
Guard.
if you don't have a ton of Immortus Guard or Stalkers, then I would say you have a choice between Crematorians or Mortis Praetorians. I think that's where
Okay.
you do have a decision branch, but I think personally, unless you're seeing shooting in the meta, which at time of recording isn't so much the case,
Yeah, it's more
it was
spell
true a
heavy
couple
at the
months
moment.
ago.
Yeah. And that
That's when you
waxes
start
and
looking.
wanes.
Yeah, we'll see what cities looks like. It might turn around. I think cities are kind of a natural predator for Bone Reapers, um, with the ability to turn off their armor save. Number one,
Go
you have the
on.
you have the ability to shut down commands
Yep.
with one of the heroes. That's that's a real problem, right? You're still going to have access to Geminids. You're still
Mm-hmm.
going to have access to impact hits. You're still going to have access to mortal wounds outside of the normal scope of things.
Yep.
I I know some people are really worried about Bone Reapers. They're really good. I'm not going to lie about that. I think their natural predator is right around the corner, and you're gonna
Wahaha.
see you're gonna see some win rates take a hit.
Yeah, and you know what? That's also the beauty of this game too, because we're talking about an army that barely has a 40% win rate right now. Some might argue it's in the 30s, but
Cities,
that
you mean?
cities, in
Yeah.
cities, and then just getting that new book of just because part of it too is like for as much as the power is increasing off of units, right? Like my shooting used to be a 6-up pajama save, that's now a 4-up doing all these things, but it also went up 50 points per 10 from where it used to be. So now I'm going to bring less, but it's better.
Right.
It's going to be interesting how that shakes out and how much all of these extra abilities and things being changed, like the wild form spell that from Gerv's battle mage that everyone and their grandmother took as an ally to be +3 to charge is now
Looking
just
at
a
you,
city.
Sylvaneth players.
Oh yeah, looking at me, Sylvaneth players, because I've done it too. I'm guilty. Yeah, man, it's great. I got an old little metal wood elf mage that's a city's mage, and He's seen a lot of action. But you know, with all these changes too, and how the book has changed from losing Stormcast as straight up coalition allies to just a regular ally, it will be interesting to see how this top meta goes. And there's also Seraphon that's really strong. Daughters of Cain never seem to have a bad time out. There's a lot of order armies that can go up and down and eat on some of these death armies. But then you have in this meta too Soulblight Gravelords that is still really strong.
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't. If we had to re-record that, I don't know that I'd have a different answer for you. I'd say the army looks a little bit different, but I think the problems are exactly the same with what you're going to be shooting down.
yep, yep. So and that's honestly the cool part about this series is we get to go in depth and see what's going on. It's snapshots throughout the meta, and as these new books drop, how do these older books react? And even then, OBR isn't an old book. It's
No, I mean
no,
it came out this spring,
yeah.
and it it did well,
hmm
and then this
Then it
season
got
flipped
good.
over,
It got real good with all this
and
magic stuff. They're poised,
the magic is really good. They also have a natural affinity to a lot of the battle tactics that are in the handbook,
which is
which a
good.
lot of armies don't.
Yes.
Uh, and
No, they don't.
and you know, like you've got like 6 or 7 tactics between your book and the general's handbook that you feel really good about, and that makes the game a
Yeah,
lot easier for you.
it does. It does. That's that first hurdle for a really good book. And if you're playing against OBR with this too, you have to keep that in mind. You are probably not stopping them from getting 5 battle tactics. So you have to figure out how to stop them on primary mission scoring if you're going to be trying to stuff them in there. Which means,
Yeah, or figure out how to steal the grand strategy off of them,
yeah,
which is pretty tough to do right now.
yeah. So it is you have to bring your own fast stuff if to pin them in their deployment zone. If they shoot out with their elite fast moving units, you circle up on them, defeat them in detail bit by bit, and then try to control the rest of the board there with numbers. Because then if they can't retreat and charge out and get your more vulnerable support pieces, if they can't retreat and then charge out onto a better spot and an objective, if you can stop them from doing that endless spell where you just don't count as scoring models, that you're giving yourself your own tools to victory here. And again, we've said Korn is good into this. We've said Nurgle. This is feeling chaos themed here, to be honest with you. But if you're going melee heavy, and then you have shooting armies like cities, if they're not bringing the spell ignore, I would even say Seraphon with mass shots and magic coming at you, and that frickin' the incarnate of Gur, if that's still around, if it didn't get nerfed at their time of recording this episode, stopping people from retreating while eating them. That's a tool, man. That's a
Yeah, it's not bad.
No, it eats endless spells and levels up, and you're like, oh, cool, I got a little Flappy Bird here. Oh my god. Ah! Now it's a level 3. Ah. So there's hope. There's hope for fighting a death army this time around. That's what we're saying.
There is, but a good player is going to make the right decisions at the right time to make your life a little bit difficult.
Yeah.
But if you don't play the game that they want you to play, then
Yeah.
you have a chance.
Good. And and that's how it should be, because this is an army where if you have the skill, the expression is there for you to be just masterful with it. It's
Yeah.
got that high ceiling where you can just keep going up and up based on how good you are at it. And I feel like that should exist in this game anyway. You know,
It should be how every army plays, right? If you have expertise levels in
stop
something,
making good
maybe a different
points.
show. Fair enough.
But no, you are 100% correct. That's how all of this should be played, and hopefully throughout this series too, if we can get some good views, people will be seeing there are ways to actually get better and improve. There are weaknesses to other armies you can learn to exploit. And I want to thank everyone for watching this episode. Do you have any closing thoughts, Brendan?
Not especially. It's a really strong army, but there are ways around it, and um, it's something that can intimidate you as opponent.
Mm,
And if you're seeing it at a tournament, you're probably not going to be able to take this piece of advice, but play it one time, see how it goes. Go, okay, let's re-rack.
yeah.
Now that you know what it does, what would you do different, right?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. That's just
I
if
think
you've
there's a
never
lot of
seen it
value.
before, just be like, okay, cool, you get your one against me. I'm gonna go and get stomped by whatever trick I don't know, and then I'm gonna learn from that because that's how you should take all of these armies too that we're covering and ones we haven't yet because this game is so expansive with so much stuff that it's gonna take you way too long to figure out how to. If you're just reading it all, you gotta see it sometimes in person. Like, oh, that rule does this. Huh.
Yeah,
Now I've got context for that. Like the catapults when the book first came out, having no rend. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. But then like 500 points of my long strike raptors died because I failed like four ups and there were like 5 damage each or whatever happened, whatever the math was. It was stupid. I was left with one model. Um,
bad time.
it was yeah, but you know what? That was my first time out playing against them, and I'm like, okay, now I know something to do differently, and I should have just shot Catacrow's dead before I had the chance to get shot off the table myself. But you know,
True.
it happens, and it was funny because the way the dice ended up, I definitely could have done it for what I shot instead. But again, you live and you learn. Because I lost, it's stuck with me now, and I've got that memory, and I know what to do. And this is a hard mountain to climb. It is, but through messing up and through losing, you will, and watching this, you will learn how to deal with it better and build yourself up as a player. So thank you for coming on the show. Totally the first time we've tried recording this episode. Not that we've had all kinds of weird things happen with this. And for everyone watching at home, be nice, roll some dice. We'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.